Good evening, friends. Welcome to our another meeting. We're tonight we're lucky to have our guest speaker, Pamela Dritt, who most of you should know. And if you don't, this is a great introduction. Pamela also happens to be the treasurer of the Concord Area Humanists. Tonight, her talk is entitled Climate Crisis or Clean, Green, Electric Future. A lifelong learner, Pamela loves to look at the big questions and tackle the topics too hot for casual conversation: politics, religion, money, class, racism, abortion, truth, the climate crisis. She's been an active advocate for helping Concord Municipal Light Plant achieve the sustainability goals the town has set. So Pamela, take it away.
Right, thank you. And I do want to invite anybody to jump right in to the chat while things are going on and make comments if you don't want to unmute yourself and just speak right up. I thought we would look at a few videos, fairly short, and talk about them. One of the things that I think most people are concerned about is the existential threat of the climate crisis and things that can be done that are better for everyone, that would create a better life and also be more economically responsible, cheaper. So when something is better and cheaper, it seems like it's a no-brainer to institute it. But there's something else that we need in order to get those things done, and that's people need to know about it. And tonight, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we could do environmentally that are the low-hanging fruit of better and cheaper, starting with protecting our kids' education and bodies with transportation. And I'm going to start with sharing the Yale Climate Connections video dealing with the Inflation Reduction Act. Has a lot of policies that are designed to increase electric transportation. And this is about that. Let me share my screen and show it to you. All right, can everyone see that? I believe
Good.
so.
Start her up.
More than half of all new cars and SUVs would need to be powered by electricity, not gasoline. Nearly all coal-fired power plants would need to be shut down. Forests would need to expand, and the number of wind turbines and solar panels would quadruple. Is that realistic?
Yeah, well, nothing that's worth doing is easy.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
This is New York City in 1900, Easter parade. There is one car in this picture in a sea of horses there. In 13 years, there was one horse in that picture. Can anyone see it? Essentially, transportation flipped in just 13 years. 13 years. When you look at the adoption of new products, new services, new technologies, new ideas, it always happens as an S-curve.
The S-curve of technological change is a constant for the major advances of the last century. And the exponential pace of technology adoption appears to be accelerating in recent decades.
The first most important thing is that we have to get going. Our choices now create options later. Everything we do creates new options.
You'll be sure we are behind, and will be behind for some time. But we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade, we shall make up and move ahead.
Once we start down this path, just like they did with the moonshot, doors will open. Opportunities will present themselves that we couldn't even have imagined. We have to start down the path.
The growth of our science and education will be enriched by new knowledge of our universe and environment, by new techniques of learning and mapping and observation, by new tools and computers for industry, medicine, the home, as well as the school.
And it may take a long time for adoption to get to 1%, 2%, 3%, but it may have been growing at 40, 50% per year, as electric vehicles, for instance, have, or as solar has. If something is growing at 40, 50% per year, once you hit 2%, then it takes 2 years to hit 4 years to hit 8%, 6 years, 16%, 8 years, it's 32%, 64, and it's over.
Despite clear evidence that solar deployment is growing exponentially, the International Energy Agency has continued to forecast only slow, linear growth over the last 2 decades, leading to a gross underestimate of solar energy impacts.
Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
Because he put resources and a lot of resources behind it and said, we don't know all the details right now, but we're pretty sure that we can do this, and we're just going to set this goal and head down that path.
And finally, the space effort itself, while still in its infancy, has already created a great number of new companies and tens of thousands of new jobs. Transit satellites are helping our ships at sea to steer a safer course. Tyrus satellites have given us unprecedented warnings of hurricanes and storms, and will do the same for forest fires and icebergs.
Oftentimes, these technical issues, they don't seem impossible because they are impossible. They seem impossible because people haven't really paid any attention.
But the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment.
He had the best technologists who came to him and said, I think we can do this.
Wind and solar have both plunged in cost so deeply, so unexpectedly quickly, that those are now the cheapest, cleanest sources of power by every measure.
And what happened as they set that goal was that they started exploring a bunch of different possibilities, and the obstacles fell one by one.
We are where New York City was in 1900, and we're on the cusp of the deepest, fastest, most consequential disruption of transportation and energy and food and cities in 100 years, if not ever. This is the time to envision what we want our cities to be when we grow up. And it's going to happen quickly.
That was not what I wanted to do.
You have stopped sharing.
Yes. Now, if I can get that back out of the trash.
You got 30 days. If you remember.
That's what had all of my my videos on it, I think. So
I'm going to stop recording.
So that is the situation we're at now. We really can have a magnificent, better future, as well as a cleaner, healthier one. And in fact, it would cost less than it's costing for us to live the way we're doing now. We have to do some major changes, but we can. We need to decarbonize the energy supply so that all of our energy is coming from solar, mainly solar, wind with battery backup to even out the supply. And with a whole lot of interconnected small microgrids of, say, people with solar panels on their roofs connected to their neighbors who have an electric vehicle that you can plug into the grid, and electric school buses and so on, because that's cheaper than fossil fuel, as well as cleaner. And transportation is the pointed edge of this revolution. And I would like to show you a flashback to a presentation from 2020 during the presidential primary, in which Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal was proposed. Instead, we have Biden, and we have his Inflation Reduction Act, but it doesn't go half as far as what this would be. And so let's watch video number 2. Share screen. Share.
What are we talking about this week, Jess? So a couple of weeks ago, Bernie released his $16.3 trillion Green New Deal. So what does it involve? So it calls for decarbonizing transportation and power, the two largest sources of emissions in the U.S. by 2030, which would lower U.S. emissions by 71%. Yeah, the plan says that the cost of doing nothing is far more expensive. And this is going to be paid for by a bunch of things. First one is the income tax revenue of the 20 million new jobs created by his plan. So that'll make $2.3 trillion in tax revenue. Then there should be the estimated $1.3 trillion saved through a reduction needed for safety net programs, because obviously those people will now have jobs. There'll be a $1.2 trillion savings from reducing military expenses relating to protecting oil shipping routes. Don't need to protect the oil anymore because there won't be any. And they'll be ending fossil fuel subsidies, and instead they'll be taxing that industry. That is huge, because right now we basically just hand them money every year instead of taxing them. And then some more things, which are, I think, pretty cool. Pursuing criminal prosecution of fossil fuel companies, which no one ever seems to want to talk about, but they knew things back in the 80s and they kept going with ruining our planet. So yeah, let's criminally prosecute them. Complete decarbonization by 2050, new wind, solar, and geothermal projects. There should be a creation of 20 million jobs in building energy efficient cars and boats, energy efficiency retrofitting of homes, sustainable agriculture, engineering, research, and development. And then at the very end of the Green New Deal, there was one little teeny tiny point. Oh, what is it? What is it, Father? It was just 3 words, and it was electric school buses. Okay, why school buses? Because we can convert them to all electric, so they don't burn diesel anymore. But who cares about a few school buses? We were just talking about some really big things there. Well, actually, there are 460,000 school buses in the United States. Now, you might be saying, oh, but, you know, regular city buses, transit buses, there's only 150,000. Wait a minute, there's 3 times more school buses than like city buses? Yes. School buses travel more miles as a fleet than transit buses do. And on any given day that school is in session, school buses will transport more passengers than all U.S. domestic airlines combined. Let me get this straight. Kids on school buses traveling, that's more than the number of people traveling on U.S. domestic airplanes going to Florida and going to California and stuff. Yes. And according to a statistical characterization of school bus drive cycles collected via onboard logging systems, school buses on average only travel 32 miles per day. So there is plenty of excess battery capacity because most buses won't use all of it. You just said excess battery capacity. What are you talking about? Well, if a school bus only has to travel 32 miles a day and still needs to be able to go on a field trip, that means you're going to have some excess battery power. Wait, so you're talking about converting all of our existing school buses into electric school buses? Yes. That sounds really hard. Actually, there's a great Jalopnik story that talks about how easy it would be to retrofit some of these buses. Because, I mean, these are not luxury cars. You know, they don't have, you know, really nice wood paneling or, you know, very fancy plastic handles and stuff like that. A school bus is basically a metal box with wheels and a motor. I mean, they are not that complicated. I mean, they're made out of I-beams and sheet metal. So, I mean, you're just saying basically slap some batteries and a motor on there and take out the old diesel engine and the other stuff. There's so much room underneath the bus, mostly just for the exhaust system and just the way that they're manufactured, that there is tons of room for batteries. And of course, you don't need great performance in a bus, so the 0 to 60 time really doesn't matter. So they can be fairly underpowered as long as they can make it up most hills. And I guess, I mean, you could just make a few kind of kits, like conversion kits, because there's only a few different bus types. And then basically, once you figure it out, like, oh, here's the battery kit, here's the motor kit, connect them together, you're good to go. Like, right. And I mean, think about it this way. Teslas have a 7 or 8 year battery warranty. Okay. But as these batteries eventually dip below 70 or 80%, which is the warranty range degradation, they can be recycled into school bus batteries. Because whoa. If they're no good in an electric car, why would they be good in an electric bus? Well, because A, you can pack way more into the electric school bus. Okay. They can be a lot cheaper since they've already been used for the premium, you know, part of their life, which is, you know, where you're getting the full 100% out of the battery. Once the degradation really kicks in after about 7 or 8 years. But aren't they just trash then? No, you could use them for either battery storage. So like you could use them in say like a Powerwall or something like that, where it doesn't really matter that they don't have the full range. Or if you pack them onto a bus, you know, it's not as efficient because the energy density isn't necessarily as good, but it doesn't really matter because, again, it's a school bus. So you're still going to get years of life out of the battery after it's used up its life on like a Tesla or a Leaf or something. Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, you could recycle the batteries out of a Tesla, either taking just the whole pack out or down to some sub component like the cell level if you really needed to. That's a really good point because school buses are notoriously top heavy with lots of, you know, kids riding high up in the bus and then the really heavy diesel engine, which is high up on the bus. And so a lot of accidents that happen with school buses are rollovers. Right. Now you're talking about slapping batteries onto the lower part of the bus so that you're making the center of gravity lower. And so you're going to drastically reduce the number of the most common accidents, which are rollovers. Right. And, you know, any weight you can add to the bus does make it safer. I mean, school buses are surprisingly safe, especially since most kids don't use seatbelts. All right. Now sell me on any other points you have to make me want to do this. Well, I mean, we'd have to devote a whole episode to that, which we're going to do. So I think that one of the first big points here is that there's going to be far less maintenance on an electric school bus than you would have on a diesel school bus. Okay, but give me some numbers. Don't just say like you'll spend a little less. Sure. So according to the CGI VTG EV School Bus Working Group, there would be a $4,400 a year reduction in maintenance costs. What, every year? Per bus. What? Yes. For every bus that you converted to electric, you're going to be spending $4,400 less on maintenance every year. And that's just maintenance. I don't understand. Maintenance on what? Like, what? How am I saving money? So, I mean, first of all, you don't have the diesel engine. Okay. Next, you have regen braking, which means that you don't have to replace the brakes hardly as often. So you have huge brake savings. Okay. There's no exhaust system underneath the bus rusting out. There's no timing belts, no water pumps, no head gasket, no oil changes, no air filters. All of the different things that contribute to a high maintenance cost on a diesel bus suddenly melt away. I mean, yes, you still have tires and you have windshield wipers and windshield wiper fluid, but other than that, You just plug the thing in and
you got to clean up some vomit every now and then.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, we save on some maintenance. Do we save anything on fuel?
Oh, yes. Because school buses are sitting around most of the time, basically 22 out of 24 hours a day, you can charge them off peak, which will save you even more money. So not only does the electric powertrain make them way more efficient, but the electricity is cheaper. So we're talking about a 75% reduction in fuel costs. Now, there is a big hidden bonus to this plan.
Oh, okay.
And that is V to G, or vehicle to grid. So what vehicle to grid means is that you can take an electric vehicle like your bus and you can plug it into a house or a business or a school, and it connects up just like a Tesla Powerwall to the grid. So there'll be a computer on board the school bus's battery that communicates with the grid, and it can either take power out of the battery when the grid needs power, or it can charge the battery when the grid needs to shed some power. Basically, this is doing the job of a peaker plant.
I don't get it. What does this mean?
Picture solar panels covering the roof of your local school.
Okay.
Now, the school bus pulls up in the morning with, say, 20% left in its battery.
Okay.
It lets the kids off at 8:30 a.m., and then it stays plugged into the school in the parking lot, soaking up all that solar power. So if at noon, for some reason, the grid needs more juice because it's too hot out and a lot of air conditioners have turned on, then the bus's batteries will give the grid power for a while to even out the load. Then, say at around 2:30, the kids get back on the bus, now with about a 60% battery, and get driven home. So now the buses return to the bus parking lot and they plug in, either to give their power or to receive it, depending on the grids and the bus's needs. You know, obviously there would be a computer to make sure that you have enough to complete your route with some margin of error. You know, that's not hard to program. It's not rocket science.
All right. So what did we just make doing all this? I don't get it.
You made a huge mobile battery. So all the time it's stabilizing the grid, and it's able to store solar and wind energy.
Wait, so we've already seen how the Hornsdale battery in South Australia worked to stabilize the grid and save money there. So this would work just the same, except this is a mobile battery. Like, these batteries are moving all over the place.
Absolutely. So today, if your town wanted to install a battery station, it would need to acquire some land to do that. You know, either it's some parcel that the town doesn't use, or they would have to lease or buy something. And with this, you already have a school bus parking lot, because every town kind of needs one, whether that be the school or it's off somewhere else. That would be your battery station now.
That's cool.
And there's another hidden bonus in this.
Oh, okay.
You know, with global climate crisis comes terrible weather events like, floods, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, and school buses are now mobile batteries. So you can fill them up with bottled water, health supplies, food, blankets. And what do you have? A mobile first responder brigade, complete with power.
So basically they can drive to a community in need, and then they can supply shelter, food, water, power for communities that have had their power knocked out.
And so what you can do now is turn practically any building into a shelter.
Okay.
Because usually you'd have to say, okay, we're planning ahead right now, and this is going to be a shelter. So we need to make sure that we have a backup power source, some kind of, generator, and we will need to, make sure that it's stocked with food and water well ahead of the storm or whatever. Now, with your mobile brigade, you can pull up to the school or some other building that wasn't really planned to be a shelter, make it a shelter.
Wow.
All the buses use their power to keep that shelter running with all the lights and all of the refrigeration and everything else you might need.
I love that. I mean, because you can fill them with supplies. I mean, that's what they're good at.
Right. Or fill them with people and get them out,
Right.
Whatever you need to do. School buses are very useful. They're very utilitarian.
Yeah. So it seems to me there's another benefit here that we're not talking about, which is health. There was a study of 61 million people back in 2015 where researchers found that exposure to diesel soot and ground level ozone created by diesel exhaust was linked to higher rates of mortality. And researchers from Georgia State University compared the standardized test scores of kids who rode old, dirtier diesel buses to those who commuted in buses with engines that had been modified or retrofitted to filter out up to 95% of the harmful pollutants. And guess what they found out? They looked at the test results from 2007 to 2015, and they found a significant increase in English scores and a small but notable gain in math scores among the clean bus riding kids.
You might be saying like, okay, sure, maybe it affects test scores, but maybe they just lived in, rich neighborhoods. But keep in mind that it is estimated that children who are bused to school spend up to 2,000 hours on board a school bus between grades K through 12.
2,000 hours.
2,000 hours. Wow. And I mean, that's the time that they are on the bus. Wow. And get this, Jimmy O'Dea, a senior vehicles analyst for the Union of Concerned Scientists, said the scientific literature is really showing with study after study, nearly every organ system in the body is at risk from higher exposure to particulate matter. Everything from the lung diseases that you might typically associate with bad air quality to heart and neurological diseases are being found to increase health risks from more exposure to these pollutants. So on top of all of this, replacing all of America's school buses with electric buses could avoid an average of 5.3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year. That's just like a little icing on the cake, right? Because I mean, the stuff that we've been talking about is huge, is super important. I mean, we're talking about big savings for the towns themselves. We're talking about health benefits for students. We're talking about awesome big battery storage facilities that are on wheels that you can bring places. Really, really cool stuff. Yeah, but you know what? I know a lot of you out there are listening right now and you're going, Zach and Jesse, again, with this pie in the sky stuff, it's never going to happen. Why are you talking about it? Well, it's actually happening right now. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, he said these buses will be quieter, more efficient, they are safer, they have seat belts. Now, what he's talking about is phase one of a plan that has started with 50 electric buses. And this contract goes out to bid next week. And the company's CEO and president, Thomas Farrell, said that the goal is to have placed 1,000 of these new buses, electric buses, on the roads within 5 years. Yeah, so Virginia wants to replace all their school buses with electric ones by 2030. And here is a really great quote. Where they are locally in garages and parking lots, we can take that electricity back and put it on the grid. And that is from Thomas Farrell. They already know that the V2G stuff is going to be cool. Yeah, I mean, Farrell referenced a study that found that replacing one diesel bus with an electric model can save a school district $700 a month in gas and maintenance costs. $700 a month. Right. Name me a school district that couldn't use that money. Exactly. I mean, a single school bus gets about 6 miles to the gallon and create as much carbon monoxide as 5 cars, according to data provided by Dominion Energy. Air quality inside the bus is often more harmful than it is outside the bus. Farrell said, when they sit there, the diesel fumes can pour into the bus. We can get rid of all that. So it's going to be much healthier for the kids and the drivers, save the school system money and reduce their carbon footprint. It's better for everybody. So, you know, we just went through a bunch of different points and you may have said, oh, Zach and Jesse, I don't know about some of those points. Here's Virginia. Here is them actually talking about all the points that we just discussed. Oh, and it's not just Virginia. In July, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and Cory Booker introduced the Clean School Bus Act in the Senate, and Representative Johanna Hayes introduced it in the House of Representatives. So this would authorize up to $1 billion in spending to help districts replace diesel school buses with electric ones. So get this, children riding to school on buses every year, they travel more than 4 billion miles each year, according to NHTSA, and those rides cost nearly $10 billion a year. That's according to the National School Transportation Association. So you might be watching at home and saying, you know, but Zach and Jesse, that's $1 billion if that bill passes of my hard-earned tax money. Yeah, I mean, that's what, like 11 F-35s that we could buy. Actually, it's only about 3 F-35s because you have to put maintenance contracts on them. So with the maintenance, it's only 3? Yeah, because the most of the cost is maintenance and fuel and stuff. The $1 billion would either get you basically to start electrifying the entire country's bus system, or it could get you 3 F-35s. So you're saying that 460,000 school buses cost the same as 3 jets? So to be fair, that's just to get the ball rolling, that $1 billion. Mm-hmm. It's going to cost something like $25,000 or so to convert a diesel bus to an electric bus once the economies of scale get going. So we're looking at approximately 460,000 buses times $25,000 a bus. That equals $11.5 billion. But keep in mind, we're going to be saving $3 billion a year in fuel and maintenance. Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you just look at your upfront cost of 11.5, you might be like, sticker shock, don't want to do it. Right. But yeah, when you factor in the fuel and maintenance and just that alone, it pretty much pays for itself in 4 years. And there are so many other hidden savings, you know, things that don't show up on the balance sheet, but do actually happen in real life for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're also getting a mobile battery that can store wind, solar, and save money by leveling the grid. I mean, what's that value? It's not building a new peaker plant.
Right.
It's the millions that would have been spent to buy or lease the land to put a mega pack on.
And it will actually be able to earn its own money.
Right.
Right. I mean, the Hornsdale battery pack was able to pay itself off in 3 years. And that's just a battery that sits there. It doesn't drive children to school.
Right.
It just sits there. It just collects wind and solar energy and distributes it to the grid.
Right.
It just stabilizes the grid. That's all it does. You'd be having this on wheels.
Or how about this? The disaster relief that we're talking about. I mean, you would now be able to turn any building into a shelter. And let's just put the cost of one major cleanup. So if we remind ourselves of what it cost to clean up Hurricane Katrina, that cost $114.5 billion in recovery.
Right.
So when a horrible thing happens, we spend a lot of money trying to help. And these converted school buses could go a long way to making that happen for people during crises.
Mm-hmm. And there's another hidden savings.
Yeah.
And this one is, to me, it's almost insidious.
What is it?
So by age 35, every extra IQ point you have should, on average, earn you $810 more per year, according to the American Enterprise Institute. Now, research has shown that poor air quality can lead to a decrease in IQ, which in one study found a decrease of as much as 6.6 points.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that the IQ points lost by kids riding diesel school buses could mean actual less money that they'd earn?
Well, I mean, that is if you put, the earnings of a person just to their IQ points. That's not to say the, the enjoyment of their life. That's just that's just money.
But I mean, you're saying that could earn them $5,000 less per year.
Right. I mean, let's say you have a job that earns you $45,000 a year. Now you're making $40,000.
Wow.
All because, and it goes the other way,
because
right?
you rode a bus.
All because you rode a bus. Now, that is just the monetary value that we can kind of equate based on IQ, which is something that we can kind of measure. But that doesn't go into, just your whole life and the quality of your entire life. And that's just IQ.
Right. I mean, we've said it many times before on the show. You can't put a value on health. So, I mean, keeping the air clean for millions of children who are sitting on buses and waiting at bus stops or standing in school parking lots full of idling diesel buses for thousands of hours during their formidable years is invaluable. But if we had to put some kind of price on it, we'd look to occupational health studies. Now, these studies are of railroad, dock, trucking, and bus garage workers who are exposed to high levels of diesel exhaust over many years, which consistently demonstrate a 20 to 50% increase in the risk of lung cancer or mortality.
And so it's important to keep in mind that if we are talking about 460,000 buses, we're also talking about at least 460,000 bus drivers.
True.
I mean, we're talking about bus drivers who are going to be driving the bus longer than the kids are going to school, the 12 years of schooling or 13 years of schooling that the kids are going to get. But again, those are adults driving the bus. Those are not little children. Those are not kindergarten aged children that are going to be getting on this bus, this diesel bus, and then getting out of the bus, walking right past the tailpipe on their way to school every single day.
Now, I think we've laid out a pretty good argument for doing this, but
Right.
I still know that there's a lot of people out there who are going to say, you know what, though, this Bernie plan is going to cost $1 billion, or if we do the whole plan, it's going to cost trillions of dollars.
Right.
And I think a lot of people immediately turn off whenever you talk about the government spending money to solve a problem. Right. They just immediately I'm not spending my hard-earned tax money on that. And I think the problem comes from this. We were never taught in school how government works.
Well, I mean, there's the legislative branch, there's the judicial branch, and there's the executive branch.
Sure.
And they all have checks and balances on each other, and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And
well, let me ask you this. If you go to the hardware store and you get the wrong color paint when you get home because they mixed it wrong, what do?
I drive right back to the hardware store. I give them the paint and I say, this paint is the wrong color. This is ridiculous. I demand a refund and I want the right color paint.
Okay. And that gets taken care of, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. What happens when you get out of college? You've had all this great education, right? And your city or town or your state is doing something you don't like.
I would complain to my friends.
Good.
I would complain to my family. I might write something on Facebook.
Okay.
Is there something else I'm supposed to do?
Well, I thought you were taught all about government in school. Why don't you know what to do? Isn't there a government working for you? Don't they take your tax dollars and bill? I'm just a bill. You see where I'm going with this? We don't know what to do. So we get angry every year that goes by in our lives. We get angrier and angrier at this government that we don't know how it works. We don't know how to interact with it. We might write them a hateful letter. We might show up at a meeting and yell at somebody, but we don't know how to actually get anything done.
I mean, the only interaction that you have with the government, if you're a law-abiding citizen, is your taxes. I mean, that's just about it. I mean, it's what the library and school and taxes. But I mean, taxes is what you're going to be doing the most of.
You do it every day. I mean, when you buy something, you're paying taxes.
Right.
At the end of the year, you're paying your taxes. You're always paying taxes. And I know you're getting upset. It's like, I pay all this money to you guys, but you never listen to me.
Right.
And so when you hear someone like Bernie say, would like to spend some money to fix a problem, you go, oh yeah, you want to just spend my money on something?
Right.
You don't listen to what I want. And I get that. And that's part of this problem is we have a lot of angry people out there. This money is going to get spent one way or the other. It's not like we're not going to have a government, right? We have a government that spends trillions of dollars. So whether you hear about the bill or you don't, there's trillions of dollars being spent as we speak, right? But you hear about this one bill and this $1 billion and it sticks in your craw and you're like, I'm upset about spending this money on this thing. But let's take another look at this.
Mm-hmm.
You know some kids, right? Maybe you got grandkids or kids yourself or your nieces and nephews or those kids down the street.
Well, I mean, let's forget about kids for a second. Electric buses will lower your electricity bill.
They'll actually lower your taxes.
I mean, think about this for a second. What happens during the summer? Kids aren't going to school. The buses are sitting there all day long in the summer.
Right.
And so they are what's happening to the diesel buses right there? They're just degrading. They're just rusting. They're just falling into nothing. If they were hooked up to the grid and they were able to capture all of the summer sunshine and charge it up during the day and distribute it during the night, there you go. Your town could very easily become its own power source.
Exactly. You've got all these town buildings, schools, municipal buildings, garages, which could be covered with solar panels and putting all that solar energy into mobile batteries.
And now you don't have to pay a utility company for your electricity. Your town can very easily, as soon as they have these electric buses, just say, okay, we're going to become our own utility.
Exactly.
We have the infrastructure. Maybe we need to, build a couple more batteries, but these buses really have a big chunk of energy storage right here, and we could probably do it.
And you might be saying, well, Zach and Jesse, that's crazy. I've never heard of any municipality owning their own power company, but lots of them do.
Right. My friend has an electricity bill of 6 cents per kilowatt hour. I, on the other hand, have an electric bill of 22 cents per kilowatt hour, and we live about 15 miles apart.
Yep.
It's his municipality that is giving him that insane benefit.
Yep.
And if you have an electric car, like we were doing the math, he could have paid for a Model 3 with the amount of savings that he would have gone from his gas burning truck to a Model 3. He would have been able to pay just with the gas savings alone. He would have been able to pay for that car. That is what we're talking about. And that is just your electric bill.
Right.
We're not getting to the taxes because electric buses are cheaper to maintain and they're cheaper to fuel. It's just that simple.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
This is just one little piece of that plan, one little idea that if you really think about it, saves so much money and makes so much sense. But yet our media doesn't delve into this. You don't hear stories about it. Why? Because there's not people yelling at each other. That's what they want. The story is all about keeping people angry at each other. They don't want you solving problems. And that's what we need to switch to, is a system where we're just talking to one another and coming up with great solutions. Wouldn't that be a much better place to live in than a world where we're just yelling at each other all the time about you're wrong?
And in a place where we're fumigating our students as they get on the bus.
Yeah. I mean, it should be a no-brainer. It should be Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. It shouldn't matter. This plan makes sense across the aisle and across countries. Anyway, I hope it makes sense to you. If it does, contact your local school committees, contact your local representatives and tell them, hey, I want electric school buses. And you know what? If you're thinking about presidential candidates, we don't care who you vote for, but make sure that the candidate you're voting for is on board with stuff like this. So when they come to your town and they start saying, hey, can I have your vote? Say, well, hang on a second. Have you heard about converting to electric school buses? Because the person who does that has got my vote.
Right.
And if they hear that from enough people, they'll go, what's this thing about electric school buses?
Right. Add that to my plan. Anyway, we hope you really enjoyed this.
Thank you. that was the second video. And I want to point out that all of those savings numbers that they were talking about were from 2020, before the Ukraine war caused the surge in gas prices. And the savings for electric school buses, they were talking about in that video, converting regular diesel buses into electric school buses. But there are also companies that you can buy brand new electric school buses, and they cost about $300,000 each, which is 3 times the around $100,000 cost of a diesel school bus. So they cost 3 times more to start with, but they save you thousands of dollars per year per bus on maintenance and fueling, and all of the other costs that aren't included, like improving your children's health and the air in your communities and your schools, our communities in our schools. And all the things you heard from Zach and Jesse Cataldo's video there are also agreed with and echoed by the American Lung Association, which has, yes, Andy?
I just wanted to point out that the recent, the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act bill, does have a pile of money for electric buses, for electric infrastructure. So, I mean, that's something to consider, but all the other points are perfectly valid.
And there was even money before that for Dieselgate. And Concord managed, with the expert help of Brian Folds, to get 3 electric school buses for our school system and the infrastructure to charge them, which is very important. We should stop spending money on fossil fuel infrastructure when we could be spending it on electric transportation infrastructure. All of the benefits that we would get. And the third little video is just short, and I will show it to you now. From the American Lung Association. So, does anybody have any questions about that? Are you all convinced? The video from Zach and Jesse Cataldo, that's a father and son Massachusetts resident team. They live in pretty much in our area. And they do excellent research on green energy projects. Yes, Jake, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of want to interject on this because I don't want to damper stuff on, I don't want to put a damper on things, but because I'm all for, better healthy environment, because I have asthma. So, I don't want to breathe any pollutants. And I think anywhere around the world could pretty much attest to global change and global warming, and we all should be concerned about it. But I just think that if we're informed of everything, we can make a better decision on how to save this. I think there was a little thing in that video that just was passed by that should be glowingly highlighted in every newspaper around the country. And that is, we can save and, eliminate carbon if we can, but we still have to pump stuff out into the world. And if we enlarged our forests, that would be a great thing. I mean, you used to hear the saying that the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the earth, but we need more lungs. And I don't really hear that much. But there seems to be an emphasis on solar and electricity, which is great. But the only problem why it's being not so much adopted is because there's inherent problems in the battery. There's certain stuff with solar that has an inherent problem with it. Like right now, most solar batteries are, solar cells are like 25 to 28% efficient. So imagine spending all this money to put on your house, on the roof of your house. That's fine because it's exposing to the light. But can you really, cover your car with solar panels? That's why Tesla doesn't do it, because it's just not really that practical. It's 25 to 28% efficient. But if we had technology to increase that efficiency, that would make it more practical. That's where we should put the research in. Then over here, I live in Michigan, there's an inherent problem with batteries that people will eventually find out, that electricity and water don't mix. So when we get extreme cold and the battery freezes, condensation will come on the battery, water and the battery don't mix, and all of a sudden your car doesn't start. But imagine if that battery was in the school bus and these kids got to go home and it's 20 degrees. So the point is, this is all valid. This is valid technology and this is valid thing. I'm just saying we just need to improve on that before we make a recommendation, because there could be big issues. We need to improve the technology we have. And there are certain things, that certain research universities who are able to make it a thinner solar cell that is so thin that you could put on a windowsill, like that, that's great. But
yes,
how
Jake, there are all kinds of new technologies and advances in the technologies that are happening as we speak. The cost of these things has gone down 90% in the 10 years for solar panel. And as you say, but we do not need perfection before we start this. It's already cheaper and better. So yes, all of the suggestions need to be taken into account, and they are being taken into account.
Ma'am, we're on the same side. We're on the same side. The only thing is, when you introduce new technology, this technology will be very, very expensive. And the thin solar cell that I told you on the window is extremely expensive right now, that it's not practical. We can have wind farms. Right now, if you go from Michigan and cross into Indiana, there's a lot of wind farms. That's easy to make. That's cheap produced. And if you notice over here, and even if you look in the news, it's getting much more windier. That is something we can do. That is very practical. But if you remember also, well, I think it was a year back, maybe one of you gentlemen or ladies could be more smarter than me, can notice when the electrical grid in Texas just shut right off, But imagine if you could combine this with electrical batteries with, instead of gas, let's say bioethanol in a hybrid car. That way you still save the, until we get to a point where we can master technology. Right now, the wind is excellent and you can put that in your backyard or something. But, it's very difficult to drive a school bus when the battery could freeze and then you have these kids in jeopardy. Or imagine if it's an ambulance.
Jake, listen.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Norway has a large number Electric vehicles are the highest selling vehicles in Norway, which is worse than Michigan in terms of cold. This is already solved. You don't need to worry about them not starting. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt with Andy that's there waiting, so let's hear him. My apologies, go ahead.
You're muted, Andy.
No wonder I'm raising my hand. I just wanted to mention that the Texas issue, they had a lot of wind turbines down there. And what happened was they didn't winterize the wind turbines because they said, this is sunny Texas. It's never going to get cold. What happened was we had a freak, very cold winter storm, just like we're going to be having more of with climate change. But it went down and it knocked all these windmills out. And that's why the grid went down. Some of the other parts of Texas that had the winterized grid, a smaller subsection, was able to continue with power. And also, you must know yourself, Michigan has a lot of solar, wind panels, I'm talking about wind turbines, and they managed to run right through the winter.
Yeah, I agree with the wind. The wind is so cheap to make, and we have suppliers who are already making these kinds of stuff. Like the propellers they use for airplanes could be easily adopted into solar wind farms. So we have technology, we have the factories and everything to be able to do that, and so I'm way for that. The other stuff, I don't know too much, I think that's a little iffy. But there are definitely environmental technologies, and there's even stuff about taking carbon and then putting them into space or putting it into the ground. I don't want to speak about that. I'm not too knowledgeable about that. But I love the wind farms because that's just so practical, and we could easily use technology. Boeing makes the propellers, and we can easily adopt that into fans and solar farms. So that's
and fantastic. We have new technologies for recycling. Windmills.
How do you recycle a car battery? How do you recycle electric batteries?
There are new companies that are doing that already.
Who are they, ma'am?
I can put links in the chat.
We could sit through another video that shows all that, but what these companies do, there's what it does, there's like a semi truck that goes out to like say a salvage yard where all the old electric cars are, and they pull the batteries out and they grind it up so that it's safe to travel, so that it's unable to explode. I mean, that's one of the issues. But this, you grind up the battery, then the truck takes that back to a plant where it's processed, and the minerals and all that are extracted from the recycled battery. And it is something you're doing.
Yeah, and the problem is that there's only few and far between of those companies, and
it's a chicken and egg thing.
No, you can easily see the top 10 companies for battery recycling. They are Umicore, headquarters in Belgium, Ecobat, Glencore, Li-Cycle Corporation in Toronto, Canada, American Battery Technology Company in Nevada, East Penn Manufacturing in Pennsylvania, Recycle Li Company, Battery Materials, Denver Lithium Group.
Ma'am, I think those companies, I think you only named one who's in America right now.
No, there's a bunch. There's also a bunch of new startups. That are doing it.
Look, I could tell you another thing.
Because there's new types of batteries. The lithium batteries have new companies that are developing the recycling for them.
The lithium battery has already a problem with heat, extreme heat. That's why they used to blow up in Samsung's phones a while back. There's a problem with these batteries. There's an inherent problem with the battery. You can't just.
Do you think we shouldn't be using batteries and developing batteries?
Ma'am, can I just speak, ma'am, without being interrupted? I gave you the courtesy. So I apologize, but I'm definitely want to be educated. But the thing is that let me just speak off and then, I'll be quiet, but just hear the point. There's no way you can get any kind of discourse if somebody is just interrupting. But you're my elder, so I'll try to be as gracious as possible. It's very difficult because there are a couple of plants and there are startups, but the problem is that the main big companies like auto companies and everything are not being able to send their batteries to them because they make cars in volumes. So some of these ones, maybe like John Deere or something like that, has a fraction of the amount of cars that are sold by a car company that they could maybe handle. These startups could handle it. But somebody on a massive scale of General Motors, they will be, they can't do that. And so they will unfortunately put it in a landfill. That's a fact. That's just unfortunately. But again, like I said, wind technology is great. But there's also another problem. If you have an electric car, which they don't tell you, Tesla, Ford, or whatever, they use different components. So the problem is that you can't just go over and plug into anything. You got to make sure that one is Ford compatible and Tesla compatible. And if you go on a long trip, let's say if I go to Michigan all the way down to California, I have to, my electric car, I got to make sure every single one of these places has the compatibility to the Ford. There is not a universal compatibility as there is, like you can go to any place that has gas. I'm not saying advocating gas. I'm just saying we need to have an infrastructure that has universal compatibility for all electric cars. That's why Tesla pretty much has to go to a Tesla place if you don't have an adapter. So there's
Jake,
a lot of
do you have an
problems.
electric car?
There's a lot of
Do you have
problems. There's a lot of
Jake,
problems.
I don't want to cut you off, but we need to, you need
No,
to.
it's all right. I think
give
it's
other
best that you
people
guys
chances
just
too.
discuss it by yourself.
Do you have an electric car, Jake? I do. And you bring up really good points about people are worried about how far they can get and how they can recharge. When I bought my car, I didn't realize what the system was, but depending on what kind of car you have, there are really good systems now that I don't have to worry. I can go on long trips and I can always charge my car and it doesn't take long. Yes, Terry, and Andy, you had your hand up too. But
Andy,
Terry?
go first, since you had your hand up first. Andy, you want to go first?
Oh, go ahead, Terry.
Okay. A very, very interesting topic, very interesting discussion, and I could see both sides, both points, etc. But I think the thing that we have to realize that this might be what Jake is saying as well. I don't speak for Jake, but I mean, we're in the early stages of electric vehicles, and I'm sure moving forward, we're going to see a lot of improvements. Maybe 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, things aren't going to be the same in the future as they are now. So, I think it's the way to go. There are some areas and issues and things that we have to resolve, but I think it makes sense to move forward in that direction. The question I have, Pamela, I think you brought this up. You said that Concord has, they purchased 3 school buses that are electric vehicles. And how's that working out? Have you heard anything, any feedback on that or anything in general?
Oh, the first year they had trouble because they had some issues they were breaking that they had to send them back to Canada to the manufacturer to get fixed. But since then, there have been no problems. This is early technology of a new system. So there are learning things to be worked out. But right now they are being bought and used by school systems all around the country. It's an S-curve thing. at the beginning of any new technology, it's more expensive. Think about flat screen televisions, for instance,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
cell phones. But
Exactly. Yeah.
they're working very well. Yes.
And are you, the last question, are you aware of any other communities in Massachusetts that are using electric buses?
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
School, but
Belmont is
Belmont, Boston,
Cambridge, I think.
there's- I wish my memory was as good. There's a local town that is has bought a whole bunch and is using them also as
okay, so that's definitely encouraging to
backup
hear.
batteries. Yes, it's the thing also is that the fossil fuel industry is putting out a lot of disinformation, because for every day that they can get the that they can delay the mass adoption of electric vehicles and electric infrastructure, that's much more fossil fuel that gets sold. And so they have a lot of money for lobbying and for reducing our ability to invest in electric infrastructure for energy systems. Right now, the cheapest way to create energy is not a gas-powered plant. It's a solar plant with battery backup, or a wind farm with battery backup. Right now, even at this far in the beginning, that's the cheapest way. It's cheaper than hydropower from dams. And it's putable anywhere. It doesn't require you to cut down forest, doesn't require you to have a river, dam a river. It's far cheaper than oil, gas, and coal power plants, electric power plants. And it's much cleaner too. But the fossil fuel industry doesn't want you to know that. And they are putting out this, all of the memes of, oh, this isn't so clean after all. Look, it has to be, it's going to fill up the land. It takes a lot of mining to mine the minerals for solar panels and batteries. Yes, it takes mining to manufacture anything, the steel for traditional cars. But this kind of mining is much more ecological than the kind of mining that the fossil fuel industry is doing to produce the gasoline. Because that is not only causing pollution from mining, but it's also ruining the ecology of the entire world. Also, our plastic, the use of plastic is a terrible pollution that the producers of the plastic aren't paying for. We are. Yes, Andy.
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to get in there before we went on full-scale climate change. I just had a couple of points. First, I should say, Pamela does have an electric car. She bought one like 4 years ago, and it does happen to be a Tesla. So we're pretty informed on Teslas, which, I don't know that's a bias, but I'm just saying she has a lot of experience with electric vehicles. And Tesla does have something called a supercharger network. It is a luxury car, but they have this premium high super fast charger. So we took a trip to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and basically it's like over 300 miles you can charge it up to. But every, say, get up to 280 miles, after like 4 hours in the car, you want to get out anyway, stretch your legs, maybe grab a bite. So you just, and also the Teslas have a map. It plots out your course where all your refueling stations, all your charging stations are. So your car will go. And if the next, it'll just charge up enough that you need to get to the next charger. It's very clever. So sometimes
It's about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes.
just to hop along to the next thing. So, but you are stopping, but maybe, you don't have to do a long drive. But and also a lot of hotels on the road, motels have, they call them destination chargers, where they have, Tesla has paid for free chargers at these hotels. So you just pull in and charge. All right, Terry, go ahead and ask.
Okay, just in response to what you're saying. So Pamela, is this the only electric vehicle that you've had? I'm just wondering if you've seen any improvements over the last 4 years in the electric vehicle, technology-wise.
Yes, but I think if everybody went out and did a switch to electric tomorrow, we would have a massive problem because we don't have currently have the infrastructure to instantly transfer.
Sure,
But
I agree.
if what you do is don't buy a gasoline new car, do not you'll be wasting your hard-earned resources on an obsolete technology. Buy a used car if you need a new car and you can't, if you need a new car and you can't afford an electric, but don't buy a gas car because that is also investing in the fossil fuel technology that we need to switch to electric. And the prices of electric cars are plummeting, just like flat screen TVs. And so is the build out of the infrastructure we need. The Tesla supercharging network is being open to other kinds of cars.
So it's not practical for me to have an electric vehicle because where I live, there's no charging station, but I do have a hybrid, and I am seeing some improvements in terms of savings in the amount of gas that I'm using, et cetera. So it's nice. It's a nice transition to eventually get into electric vehicles down the road.
I had a hybrid too, but the thing is that you get all the disadvantages of a gasoline engine with a hybrid. You still have the oil changes, you still have the tune-ups, you still have the cost.
No, I agree, but
hybrids are mostly very small and they don't charge very fast.
Yeah, I agree. But, again, all of us can't, it's not practical for everybody to get an electric vehicle. And it's not where I live. I live in a
if people do it as they need a new car in the future, it'll be gradual enough that we can do it. I think the benefits are going to outweigh anything else. Andy.
To address Terry's, one of her questions, keep asking. There have been quite many improvements in the technology of electric cars, primarily in the batteries, as you might expect. They're getting lighter, they last longer. I mean, you see that in your computers and other devices. It's the same with electric cars. Most people charge their cars at home. I mean, if they're lucky enough to have solar panels, but most cars come with like an adapter. You can plug your car right into your house current. It doesn't charge much, but it's kind of like a trickle charge. And it really depends on how much you have to travel. If you have a heavy commute, then maybe that wouldn't work out for you. You might have to actually, you might have to up your power at your house, a 200-watt service, but you can put a charger in your garage or next to your house and charge your car at home. It depends on your lifestyle. And there's lots of cheaper cars now, Hyundai, Kia, even the Chevys, the cheap Chevy ones, the Bolt. That initial problem the Bolts had was due to a third-party supplier. It wasn't really Chevy that had the problem, but the batteries they were putting in had a problem. but that problem has gone away now. So there's there's a lot to be said, and also even like a Tesla, you could buy a used Tesla and still have 4 years of battery life on your car and have a nice car. But it really depends on
Buy
your.
a Model Y for the average price of a new car.
I wanted to point out also
Average price of a new car, gasoline, any kind, is 45,000.
another big
apparently.
issue is rebates that we have now. For cars lower their prices, they have incentives, and depending if you have state or local rebates on top of the federal, you can easily knock off 10 grand, 15 grand off your car, depending on what it is, has to qualify for the rebate plan. But if you're in the market for a car, you definitely should look into electric, depending on how it fits your lifestyle.
I didn't know about charging when I bought my car. I just figured, well, they must have figured that out. I just want to be green. But I found out I can plug it into a regular outlet. It comes with a cord that I can do that with, and it will add about between 4 and 5 miles to the car for every hour that you've got it plugged in. And when I went to my parents' house in Tennessee, that's exactly what I did. I just kept my car plugged into the outside outlet by the driveway of the house, where he plugged in, lawn hedge clippers and things like that. And that gave me plenty of juice because I wasn't driving very much. Like overnight, it would give me what? 5 times 5, 25, 50 miles just from plugging it into the regular wall outlet.
Another point that Jake made, I'm sorry that he left. I hope he sends me a message on Meetup. The issue about using other charging networks, because the first thing you need to know about buying an electric car is where are you going to charge it from? And maybe it doesn't matter if you can't charge it at home, but if there's a charger in town, as long as you can get to it, that's fine. That you can work that way. If you have a commute, maybe there's a charger in the town nearby or at your business. Some companies are putting chargers in, but the Tesla comes with an adapter to fit into ChargeNet or all the other standard networks. We do have a standard charging plug, so that's not really an issue. And Tesla has the largest number of superchargers. They're actually coming out with an adapter that's built in so that other companies can actually charge their vehicles. Ford, Mustangs or the Ford pickup truck, they can charge their vehicles on the Tesla supercharger network. So it's early days. Everybody's building these things, but that's actually the charging infrastructure network is part of the IRA Inflation Reduction Act. There's billions of dollars floating out there, and we will see growth in there. It's just years coming.
I just hope that other companies adopt Tesla's American standard charging system.
Yeah, well, it's getting kind
better.
of late.
Also,
do we have
one thing I want to say about charging. I live in a condo, and there's no way to charge here except for the charge point charger that the condo association put in that has 2 plugs, so it can charge two cars. But there were enough lower time charging cars in the condo association that they complained to the light plant that it was costing them a lot because they had to charge for hours and hours, and the charger was charging them per hour of being plugged in there instead of by the amount of electricity that the car absorbed from the charger. And like plug-in hybrids pull power down slowly compared to like my Tesla, which can pull down for a level 2, it can pull down hundreds of miles in 1 hour. of electric charge. So they switched. Before the charger in my neighborhood, in my condo complex was put in, I would walk to the Concord depot, which has a charge point charger there, and plug my car in there. And then I could walk back to the condo in about 5 minutes. And that's where I charged my car. But most people who can charge at home. Anyway, the slower charging cars got the Concord light plant to change the pricing for the one in my condo complex to be per amount of electricity you got instead of by a whole hour. And suddenly the cost for me to charge my Tesla doubled because I could get a lot more electricity in 1 hour than the other cars could. And when the light plant was pricing it by the amount of electricity it pulled, it was higher per unit of electricity than it was per hour of the amount of electricity it could send through.
I was going to ask Diane, do you have any questions? Are you in the market for a car? Are you there?
I'm here, yeah. Yeah, my next car will be electric.
All right.
There's all kinds
I mean, I'm obviously concerned about myself, but I'm concerned about I'm hoping that the electric vehicle movement is successful, you know. I don't want it to be hijacked by other things. And I'm hoping that the battery problems are solved.
I don't think I think they're pretty much solved. Oh, by the way, there's a really great idea for a utility sized battery, which is, we have great technology for liquefying natural gas and liquid nitrogen, which is essentially compressed and liquefied air. And we can use that technology to simply liquefy the air, which is mostly nitrogen anyway.
Compressed air.
Compress the air into liquid form with excess solar and wind energy in times when we have too much of it. And then use that compressed air, let it expand back out into air as a power source when we need power.
Drive a turbine or a generator.
Out of it. And one of the things we can do with that is we can remove the carbon from the air as we compress it. That's a carbon capture. That's a double benefit. It's cheap technology. It's well documented, well used already.
Is there a movement whereby electric cars will be available such that people don't have to make long trips? You know, they can segment the trips, you know, by swapping off cars. I don't know. You know, if this.
I make 1,000-mile trips in my car, no problem.
Okay.
I drive all day and all night, and I get from Concord to Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
No, but you were talking about scaling up. You know, if there's a lot of electric cars available now, there would be a delay in terms of availability of charging stations. But maybe one.
Well,
you know,
there isn't
one
for
way.
Tesla.
No,
There
but
is
one
a
way around.
problem with non-Tesla charging stations, Electrify America, and the other ones with fast chargers, which they tend to break very easily, and the systems aren't well set up. If and if people have like a Rivian or a Ford truck, electric truck, or other non-Tesla cars, and they try to go on trips, they're likely to be really frustrated and discouraged if they pull into a place where there's supposed to be a charging station, and there's 3 chargers there, and 2 of them are broken, and the other one won't talk to the car. That never happens with Tesla. And I'm afraid that all somebody would need is 1 or 2 bad experiences. If you had a 20% chance that the gas station you pulled into wouldn't work, it would be a real problem. And that's solved for Tesla. It isn't solved yet for the rest of electric vehicles, but it can be solved if they would just use the Tesla system.
Mhm.
Yes, Andy.
Just a couple of quick points. Again, I want to talk to Jake, but he's not here. But the solar panel issue, there are tremendous solar farm arrays all over the planet, and the one that they mentioned in Australia, a giant, I don't know what it is, like maybe 460 megawatts, but they actually have a cable. It's been sending power to Singapore from Australia. It's mind blowing. The other thing is, if you know what peaker plants are, on the grid, when we have peak use of electricity, maybe in the winter for heat or the summer for air conditioning, the electric grid, the power system, they spin up these power plants they're kind of waiting. They're not on standby. They're normally natural gas. And it takes like 10 minutes to fire these babies up. And then boom, you bring on this extra power plant. It's very expensive. It's more expensive for the grid because you have to plan for this whole extra plant that's only used when you have these peaks. So, but anyway, they're now building solar paneled peaker plants. So you just basically hit a switch and boom, your solar panels, you have all this energy. They all have giant, megawatt batteries for these things. So they store these batteries, and they can also regulate the grid. So depending on if the use starts to peak up, they send out the batteries that's stored, battery juice. If the usage goes down, they just recharge the batteries. So that was one issue. And the second thing about the improvements of batteries, you must have heard that Hertz is buying like 100,000 electric cars. They happen to be Teslas. And also even budget rental cars. They're also buying these cars. So when you travel in a plane, you, instead of getting an ICE car, internal combustion engine, an old legacy ICE car, you can perhaps try driving an electric car, get a sense of, or even take one out for the weekend just to try it out, see if you like it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking in terms of any kind of fleet cars. That would be good to have them electrify as quickly as possible, just because then they can switch off as they need. They can switch off the cars if they need to.
And they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't think they could make money. And also, look at Amazon, a lot of these trucks. Amazon has a lot of electric vans, those big step vans. I don't know about UPS and DHL, but FedEx, they're all going to be doing that because they run the numbers, and it's so much cheaper to run electric.
Right.
I didn't realize how much I was gonna. I mean, it hadn't sunk in that I don't have to change the oil. There is no oil. I don't have to tune up ever.
What about your
inspection
today? You had an inspection today. It took like 10
I had to
minutes.
inspect my car. They had to make sure that the lights worked and things. I don't even have to change. I've had it for.
It's 4 years you've had it.
Yeah, things don't break much. I've had some power with the charge port, but I got it fixed.
They
Under
just
what?
replaced the port.
Yeah.
Jim, do you have
Um,
any questions? Anything you'd like to say?
Thanks. I don't really have an electric car, or I don't know too much about it, but I do plan to get one in the future. But right now I don't have one. Deborah doesn't either. But maybe in a few years we'll be getting them.
Okay,
There-
great.
Another thing with batteries, like with schools and buildings like that, especially ones with solar, if they have batteries with them, then they can, and the buses can be used as that kind of battery, then they don't have to have a generator, a backup generator. Because even in an emergency, the sun is still going to work to recharge the batteries when you're not using the school. And we can have networks of batteries and solars. So you get what's called a virtual power plant, which is just all of the people who have solar and batteries connected together, like the internet connects us all together. Yep.
I just wanted to call on Paul. I don't have to convince him. I know he's already installed a geothermal heat pump. He's a true believer. I don't hear you. I'm not getting anything. You have a mic? Oh, there you go. I hear you now.
I don't hear you.
I heard you for a blip, and then maybe it's a loose connection. Plug in, plug out. Nope. Can't hear you.
It's very sad. Well,
I know
Uh,
you're using Linux. Must just be a connection issue. I know you.
I hope.
No.
No, we can't hear you, Paul, unfortunately.
I did enjoy that last Boston Linux meeting that we went to, and Jitsu, different meeting format. Can't hear you, man.
Well,
I think we're about due. Everyone's had a chance to speak for the time. I don't want to keep you folks any later. So I will stop recording now.